The Speaker recognizes Representative Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak today on this very important subject that has captivated the attention of my constituents, and rightfully so. I represent the great people of the 10th District, which is located in northwest Detroit, which is a long way from here, both figuratively and literally. I debated whether or not I wanted to debate this issue because, let's face it, not one floor speech in this lame duck session has changed anyone's vote. But I am a representative, and I was elected to speak out on behalf of those who are silent and those who are angry. And I'll begin by sharing a familiar story. Scripture tells us when Joshua and the Israelites arrived at the gates of Jericho, they could not enter. The walls of the city were too tall to climb and too strong to be brought down by brute force alone. So they sat for days, unable to pass on through. But God had a plan for his people. He told them to march around the city, and on the seventh day, at the sound of the ram's horn, to cry out in one single voice. At the chosen hour, the ram's horn was sounded, and a chorus of voices rang out. The walls of Jericho came tumbling down. This is what Scripture tells us. There is much we can learn from this passage, many lessons that can be taught. Mr. Speaker, if you listen closely to the chorus of voices that were outside of this assembly yesterday, you heard the voices of those who have come here to tear down these walls of oppression. And in this house, one voice full of courage is a majority. This past November, the voters said this type of legislation was not what they sent us here to do. Those voices didn't just come from those urban areas, but they came from around this state. They sent us here to protect them from oppressive governments, not to empower dictatorships. If you're like me and my fellow patriots, you believe that this country was founded on a simple belief, that our freedom does not come from our government, it comes from our God. It is the role of government to protect that freedom. It is our role as legislators to make that happen. A revolutionary named Thomas Paine, some who may even call an extremist, once said, and I quote, "The duty of every patriot is to protect this country from his government," end quote. Today, I fear legislators in this House are going to betray their oath and turn their backs on freedom and ignore their responsibility to the values they proclaimed during a campaign. This is why I'm confused, but I'm glad we are having this debate, because in other countries, this type of debate is typically resolved through genocide, civil war, rapes, and executions. In my own estimation, this debate is essentially broken down to two very different views of how the state wants to assert its power into a local municipal issue. Again, I stress a local municipal issue. My Republican colleagues, I believe, view this legislation as a tool to get government spending under control and to make the changes that otherwise could not be made, such as breaking union contracts and, secondly, weakening the legislative body. While my Democratic colleagues view this as an attack on our civil rights, our voting rights, and exclusion from the equal protection under the law. We don't believe this is about getting things right in Detroit. What we do believe is this is about getting someone from the far right into the Coleman Alexander Young Municipal Center. From my own perspective, this legislation is bankrupt of integrity and honor. Why? I'm glad you asked. Let us look at history to better understand our future. It took a revolutionary war against British oppression by farmers to achieve independence. People with no military training or advanced weapons had to fight off a superior army. It took a bloody civil war by which over 625,000 people died trying to answer one question: do we have a union or a confederacy? That war led to 4 million African slaves being freed from their bondage. It took 100 years after that for the descendants of those freed Africans to receive full equality under the law. It took a petite woman from Alabama to sit on a bus and say, "That's it, I'm tired, I ain't getting up from this seat." That petite woman who later moved to Detroit sparked then what we recognize now as the modern-day civil rights movement. Today, the struggle for equality, freedom, and independence and fairness continues because of oppressive legislation like this before us here today. I'm afraid that this democracy in a few moments will die a second death to the gentle depression of 64 votes on a green button that will once again turn back the hands of time to a decadent age. If you look into the eyes of any Detroiter, any real Detroiter, what you will see in their soul is pain, suffering, frustration, and a defiance that prevents Detroiters from quitting, from walking around away from a problem because it seems too difficult, even though others have turned their backs on us, betrayed us, used political numbers to rewrite legislation to take revenue sharing away from us, and even had the nerve to say, "Let Detroit go bankrupt." We are defiant because we reject an idea we are incapable of governing ourselves. We are all united in our common journey, moving forward toward achieving the change we need. Since the decision for the state to take over Detroit's finances has already been made, I want to share a piece of advice with my colleagues. And to the governor, since you have decided to take it upon yourself to represent the city of Detroit. As an accountant, you cannot just take control of the spreadsheets. You just can't take the money and run. This is a package deal. You must take all of the problems. Let me tell you what being a Detroit representative is all about. You must accept the responsibility of embracing a mother who lives down the street from me, whose 9-month-old child named Derek Miller was savagely gunned down when his home was shot up with an AK-47 at 4 a.m. in the morning, and the killer has still not been arrested. How do those numbers add up? You must absorb the responsibility of visiting the schools in our city and doing what you can to motivate the students to keep learning. And when you are asked by a 6th grader at Carver Elementary School, why should I be positive about the future? Because when I walk to school, I'm in danger. I see abandoned homes. I see trash. And when I'm caught in a moment of daydreaming, I look out the window and my future looks worse. How do you reconcile those receipts? What can you do with a spreadsheet for Kayvon Coleman, an 18-year-old who was shot at the corner of Greenfield and Schoolcraft for his gym shoes? He's a senior at Central High School who had dreams of playing basketball at the University of Michigan, your alma mater. Today, his only aspirations are to simply walk again. What do you say to his mother who lost her jobs because she now has to take care of her son during these difficult times? I hope as a representative this issue does not get referred to accounts payable. In closing, Mr. Speaker, enshrined in the tomb of President John F. Kennedy at Arlington National Cemetery, you will find these words that have served as a source of motivation and inspiration for me. And I quote, "The 3 most important needs of every human being on earth are not food, clothing, and shelter, as much as the need for freedom, justice, and healing. It is the gross inequality of food, clothing, and shelter that divides us, and the absolute necessity for freedom, justice, and healing that unites us. Clearly, we need a far more realistic understanding of who we are and why we are here in order to have an honest relationship with each other. The Irish tell a story of a man who died and went to heaven and was greeted by St. Peter. The man said, 'Please let me in.' St. Peter looked at the man and said, 'Certainly, but you must show me your scars.' The man replied, 'Scars? I have no scars.' St. Peter then responded, 'What a shame. Was there nothing on the earth God created worth fighting for?' Mr. Speaker, Detroit is worth fighting for.